Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the starship New Horizon and watched the alien world grow larger on the main screen. The planet looked like a giant crystal ball floating in space. Blue and silver towers reached up from the surface like frozen lightning. This was Zephyros Prime, home to the most powerful alien race humans had ever found. Jake rubbed his jaw and tried to look calm. Inside, his heart was beating fast. He was a former Marine who had fought in 3 wars on Earth. But this was different. This was humanity's first real chance to make friends with aliens who could either help them or destroy them. Dr. Lisa Park walked up beside him. She was the team's expert on alien life. Her tablet was full of notes about the Zephyrians. Captain, remember what we learned about their culture. They respect strength above everything else. They have conquered dozens of other alien races. Jake nodded. I know, Doc. Don't bow, don't show fear, and don't let them think we're weak. Behind them, Ambassador Helen Wright checked her formal dress uniform one more time. She was Earth's best diplomat, but even she looked nervous. Commander Ryan Cole stood near the weapons console, his hand resting on his sidearm. He trusted aliens about as much as he trusted a snake. The ship's computer announced their arrival. Entering Zephyrian space, we are being scanned by multiple ships. Jake looked out at the alien fleet surrounding them. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful and deadly, shaped like silver birds with energy weapons that could turn the New Horizon into space dust in seconds. But they had come here to talk, not fight. A voice filled the bridge. It was cold and musical, like wind chimes made of ice. Human vessel, you will follow our escort ships to the Royal Landing Platform. Any deviation from the prescribed course will result in your destruction. Jake picked up the microphone. This is Captain Jake Martinez of the Earthship New Horizon. We understand and will comply. We come in peace. There was silence. Then a different voice, deeper and more threatening. Peace is a luxury earned through strength, humans. We shall see if you possess either. The ship flew through clouds that sparkled like diamonds. The capital city spread out below them like a frozen ocean. The buildings were made of some kind of crystal that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow colors. Alien ships moved between the towers like schools of metal fish. They landed on a platform the size of a football field. As soon as the engines shut down, Jake felt the weight of what they were doing. 4 humans about to meet with aliens who ruled half the galaxy. Remember the plan, Ambassador Wright said. I do the talking. Captain Martinez provides military presence. Dr. Park observes their culture. Commander Cole watches for threats. They walk down the ship's ramp onto the alien world. The air smelled like ozone and flowers. Gravity was a little lighter than Earth's, making each step feel bouncy. A group of Zephyrian guards waited for them. The guards were tall and elegant, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. They wore armor that looked like it was grown rather than made, flowing and organic but clearly strong. Their faces were beautiful but cold, like living statues. Follow, said the leader. His voice carried the same musical quality they had heard on the ship. They walked through corridors that seemed to be carved from single pieces of crystal. Light flowed through the walls like liquid gold. Other Zephyrians they passed stopped to stare at the humans. Some looked curious. Others looked like they smelled something bad. Jake noticed that every Zephyrian stood perfectly straight, moved with precise steps, and never smiled. Everything about them screamed discipline and control. It was like walking through a palace full of beautiful robots. The throne room doors were 30 feet tall and covered with carvings that seemed to move in the light. They opened silently, revealing a space bigger than most Earth stadiums. The ceiling was lost in shadows high above. Hundreds of Zephyrian nobles lined the walls, all watching the humans with the same cold stare. At the far end of the room sat the throne. It was carved from a single block of black crystal and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And on that throne sat Queen Lyrelei. Jake had seen her picture in the intelligence files, but seeing her in person was different. She was tall, even sitting down, with the same pale blue skin as her people, but somehow more vibrant. Her hair was long and silver, flowing over her shoulders like liquid metal. Her dress seemed to be made of starlight itself, shifting and changing color as she moved. But it was her eyes that caught Jake's attention. They were deep purple like the space between stars, and they seemed to see right through him. This was a being who had lived for centuries and ruled an empire that spanned star systems. The humans walked forward across the vast floor. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. Every eye in the room was on them, judging, measuring, waiting for them to show weakness. Ambassador Wright stepped forward when they reached the base of the throne. She began the formal greeting they had practiced. Your Majesty, I am Ambassador Helen Wright, representing the United Earth Government. We come seeking friendship and mutual understanding between our peoples. Queen Lirali did not move. She did not even blink. The silence stretched on until Jake could feel sweat on his back despite the cool air. Finally, the Queen spoke. Her voice was like music played on crystal bells. Beautiful but cold. Another species comes before us, seeking what they call friendship. Tell me, Ambassador Wright, what makes you think your species has anything to offer the Zephyrian Empire? Ambassador Wright started to give her prepared answer about human technology and trade possibilities. But Jake stepped forward. Your Majesty, he said, his voice echoing in the huge room. We're not here to beg. We're here because we heard you were smart enough to recognize opportunity when you see it. The throne room went completely silent. Dr. Park's face went pale. Commander Cole's hand moved toward his weapon. Ambassador Wright looked like she wanted to disappear, but Queen Lirali leaned forward slightly. For the first time since they entered, she seemed actually interested. Interesting, she said, and Jake could swear he heard amusement in her voice. Most species that come before me either grovel or threaten. You do neither. Tell me, Captain Martinez, what is this opportunity you speak of? Jake looked up at her, meeting those purple eyes directly. Humans don't conquer. We make allies. And allies are worth more than subjects because they choose to fight beside you. The Queen studied him for a long moment. Then, impossible as it seemed, one corner of her mouth curved up in what might have been the beginning of a smile. How refreshingly primitive, she said. We shall see if your species is as interesting as its captain claims. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived on Zephyros Prime. The formal talks between Ambassador Wright and the Zephyrian Council happened every day in a room full of officials who spoke in careful, measured words. Treaties and trade agreements were slowly taking shape, but Jake found himself called to different meetings. Queen Lirali had requested his presence for what she called cultural observation sessions. The first time, Jake thought it was some kind of test. The 10th time, he started to wonder if there was something else going on. Today, like every day, a royal guard came to fetch him from the human quarters. The guard was a female Zephyrian named Vexia, who seemed less cold than the others. She actually nodded when she saw Jake instead of just staring. The Queen requests your presence in the observation chamber, Vexia said in her musical voice. Jake walked with her through the crystal corridors. He had gotten used to the way other Zephyrians stopped and stared when they saw him. Some looked curious. Others looked annoyed. A few looked like they wanted to step on him like a bug. The observation chamber was smaller than the throne room, but still huge by human standards. One wall was made of clear crystal that looked out over the capital city. Queen Lirali stood with her back to the door, watching the traffic of flying ships move between the towers. Your Majesty, Jake said. He had learned not to bow. The first time he tried, she had told him it looked ridiculous. She turned around. Today she wore a simple dress that changed color from blue to green as she moved. Her silver hair was pulled back, making her face look younger somehow. Captain Martinez, please sit. She gestured to a chair that looked like it was grown from crystal but felt soft as leather. Jake sat down and waited. Over the past weeks, he had learned that Queen Lirali liked to take her time getting to whatever she wanted to say. I have been reading the reports from your Ambassador Wright, the Queen said. Your species offers technology, resources, military cooperation. The same things every species offers when they want something from us. But, Jake asked, but you personally have offered me coffee, stories about Earth weather, and pictures of something you call dogs. She sat down across from him. Explain this behavior. Jake thought about it. Where I come from, that's how you get to know someone. You share things, small things, personal things, food, stories, pictures of things that make you happy. And this serves what purpose? It builds trust. You can't really know someone from their official reports. You have to know what makes them laugh, what they worry about, what they love. Queen Lirali was quiet for a moment. Laugh, she repeated like she was trying to remember what the word meant. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out his tablet. He scrolled through pictures until he found what he was looking for. Here, this is my neighbor's dog back on Earth. His name is Buster. The picture showed a golden retriever covered in mud, tail wagging, with what looked like a huge grin on his face. This creature is happy? The Queen asked, very happy. He just found the biggest mud puddle in the park and jumped in it. His owner was mad, but Buster didn't care. He was having the time of his life. Queen Lyrelay stared at the picture for a long time. He appears to be experiencing joy for its own sake. That's exactly right. Zephyrians do not experience joy for its own sake. Joy must be earned through achievement, through victory over obstacles. Jake looked at her. That sounds exhausting. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. It is the way we have always lived. Doesn't mean it's the only way to live. The Queen stood up and walked to the crystal wall. I have ruled this empire for 312 years, Captain Martinez. I have conquered 17 star systems. I have never known defeat in battle or politics. I have everything any being could want, but... She was quiet for so long that Jake thought she wasn't going to answer. Finally, she said, I have never jumped in a mud puddle. Jake almost smiled, but something in her voice stopped him. She wasn't joking. She was admitting something that probably no other person in the galaxy had ever heard her say. It's not too late, he said quietly. She turned to look at him. I am the queen of the Zephyrian Empire. I do not play in mud. No, but you could try ice cream, or chocolate, or dancing to music just because it sounds good. Dancing serves no strategic purpose. Neither does smiling. But it makes you feel better. Queen Lyrelay walked back to her chair, but instead of sitting properly like she always did, she sat sideways with her legs curled under her. It was such a small change, but it made her look less like a queen, and more like a person. Tell me about this dancing, she said. Jake spent the next hour describing different kinds of music and dancing from Earth. He showed her videos on his tablet of everything from ballroom dancing to street parties. The Queen watched everything with the same intensity she probably used to study battle plans. The humans in these videos appear to be happy, she said finally. They are. Music makes people happy. Dancing with other people makes you feel connected. Connected. She said the word like she was tasting it. Dr. Park's voice came through Jake's communicator. Captain, sorry to interrupt, but we need you back at quarters. We have some readings I want to discuss with you. Jake stood up. I have to go, Your Majesty. But thank you for the conversation. Captain Martinez, she said as he reached the door. Tomorrow, bring this coffee you keep mentioning. I wish to experience this beverage, Jake smiled. I'll bring the good stuff. Back at the human quarters, Dr. Park was waiting with her scanner and a worried expression. Commander Cole was cleaning his sidearm for the third time that day, which meant he was nervous about something. What's the problem, Doc? Jake asked. Dr. Park showed him her tablet screen. It was covered with charts and graphs that meant nothing to Jake. I've been monitoring the Queen's biochemistry during your meetings. Jake, her pheromone levels are changing. Is she sick? No, she's... This is going to sound crazy, but I think she's developing an emotional attachment. Her body chemistry is shifting in ways that suggest attraction, curiosity, and something that looks a lot like affection. Commander Cole looked up from his weapon. That's bad news, Captain. Getting emotionally involved with an alien ruler is a good way to compromise the mission. Ambassador Wright nodded. Ryan's right. We can't afford to have personal feelings interfere with diplomacy. Jake sat down heavily. She's not just an alien ruler. She's a person who's been alone for 3 centuries. All she knows is conquest and control. She's never had a friend. And you think you can be her friend? Dr. Park asked. I think someone should try. You should see her when she thinks no one is watching. She's not this cold, perfect queen. She's lonely. Commander Cole put his weapon down. Jake, I've known you for 5 years. You've got a good heart. But this alien could kill you with her bare hands. She rules an empire that could wipe out Earth without breaking a sweat. She could have done that already if she wanted to. Instead, she's sitting with me asking about dogs and dancing. Ambassador Wright looked thoughtful. The formal negotiations are going well. Better than we hoped, actually. The Queen seems much more willing to work with us than intelligence predicted. Maybe because she's starting to see us as people instead of just another species to conquer, Jake said. Dr. Park checked her readings again. There's something else. I've been scanning other Zephyrians in the palace. Some of them are showing similar biochemical changes. Curiosity, interest, even what might be amusement. I think your interactions with the Queen are affecting how her people see humans. Jake thought about Vexia, the guard who had started nodding at him. About the servants who sometimes smiled when they thought no one was looking. About the way some of the nobles seemed to listen more carefully during the formal meetings. So what do we do? he asked. Ambassador Wright stood up. We continue the mission. But Jake, be careful. Personal feelings and diplomacy don't mix well. That night, Jake lay in his bed looking out at the alien stars. Tomorrow, he would bring coffee to a queen who had never tasted it. He would share another small piece of human culture with someone who was learning that there might be more to existence than conquest and control. He thought about Dr. Park's scans, about biochemical changes and emotional attachments, but mostly he thought about the way Queen Lyrelai had curled up in her chair and asked about dancing, like someone who had just discovered that the universe was bigger and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. Jake carried 2 cups of coffee through the palace corridors. The smell made several Zephyrian servants stop and sniff the air with curious expressions. He had learned to make coffee the way his grandmother taught him, strong and hot with just a touch of sweetness. Queen Lyrelai was waiting in what she called her private study. It was smaller than the other rooms Jake had seen, filled with books and star charts and what looked like personal items. For the first time, he was seeing a space that belonged to her as a person, not as a queen. Your Majesty, Jake said, offering her one of the cups. She took it carefully, holding it like it might explode. The aroma is pleasant. Try it slow. It's hot. She took a small sip and her eyes widened. It is bitter but also warm. And there is something else. That's the sweetness. Sugar. We add it to make bitter things more enjoyable. Queen Lyrelai took another sip, larger this time. This is what humans consume for pleasure? Coffee's more than that. It's social. People meet for coffee to talk, to share ideas, to spend time together. It's about connection. She nodded slowly like she was filing this information away. Show me more about this connection. Jake pulled out his tablet and scrolled to a video from Earth. It showed a busy coffee shop with people sitting together, talking, laughing, reading books. See? They're not doing anything important by Zephyrian standards. No conquest, no politics, no power games. They're just enjoying each other's company. They appear. Content, she said, watching a young couple share a piece of cake. Humans are social animals. We're happier when we're with other people we care about. Queen Lyrelai was quiet for a long time, drinking her coffee and watching the video. Finally, she said, I have not experienced contentment in many decades. Jake looked at her. She was staring into her cup like it held answers to questions she had never thought to ask. When was the last time you were content? He asked gently. Perhaps when I was very young. Before I became queen, I had a teacher who would take me to the gardens and tell me stories about distant stars. I felt safe with her. What happened to her? She died. As all beings do eventually. I learned that caring for others only leads to pain when they are gone. Jake set down his coffee. I'm sorry. That must have been hard. It was educational. I decided then that a ruler must stand alone. Emotional attachments make you weak. Or they make you stronger because you have something worth fighting for. Queen Lyrelai looked at him sharply. Explain. Jake thought about how to put it into words. When I was in the Marines, I fought alongside people I cared about. We weren't just following orders. We were protecting each other, protecting our families back home. That made us fight harder, not weaker. But when they died, it hurt. It hurt more than anything I've ever felt. But I wouldn't trade those friendships for anything. The pain of losing someone you care about is the price you pay for having them in your life at all. The Queen stood up and walked to a window that looked out over her gardens. Jake could see the place she had mentioned, where a young alien girl had once listened to stories about the stars. Would you show me these gardens? Jake asked. She turned, surprised. They are private. No one has walked there with me since your teacher died? She nodded. Then maybe it's time. The gardens were like nothing Jake had ever seen. Plants from dozens of worlds grew together in perfect harmony. Flowers that glowed in the dim light, trees that sang in the wind, grass that felt like silk under their feet. It was beautiful and peaceful and completely different from the formal spaces of the palace. This is where I come when the weight of ruling becomes too much, Queen Lyrelai said. It is the only place where I can remember who I was before I became what I am. They walked along paths made of smooth stones that seemed to glow from within. Jake noticed that the Queen's posture was different here. Less rigid, more relaxed. She even smiled when a small flying creature landed on her shoulder and chirped a greeting. Tell me about your teacher, Jake said. For the next hour, Queen Lyrelai told him stories. About the woman who had raised her, who had taught her about science and philosophy and kindness, about lessons learned in these very gardens about the balance of nature and the importance of caring for things that couldn't protect themselves. "She sounds wonderful," Jake said when she finished. She was. And when she died, I felt like part of me died with her. So I buried that part and became the queen my people needed. Strong, cold, alone. But you're not really alone anymore, are you? She looked at him, and for a moment her carefully controlled expression slipped. "No," she said quietly. "For the first time in centuries, I am not alone." They sat on a bench near a fountain that made music as the water fell. Jake showed her more pictures from Earth, and she told him about other worlds she had seen. They talked about books and music and the differences between their peoples. "Captain Martinez," she said. Eventually. "Jake, just Jake, we're not in the throne room." "Jake," she said his name carefully, like she was trying it out. "Why do you spend time with me? Your mission would succeed without these meetings." Jake looked at her, sitting in her private garden, holding a cup of coffee, looking more human than alien despite her blue skin and silver hair. "Because you asked me about dogs and dancing. Because you wanted to know what coffee tastes like. Because underneath all that royal training, you're curious about the universe in a way that reminds me of the best people I've known. And because you are lonely too," she said. It wasn't a question. Jake realized she was right. He had been so focused on her isolation that he hadn't thought about his own. Command was lonely. Being responsible for other people's lives for humanity's future among the stars was a burden he carried alone. "Yeah," he said. "I guess I am. Then perhaps we can be lonely together for a while." They sat in comfortable silence as alien stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Jake thought about Dr. Park's scans about biochemical changes and emotional attachments. But mostly he thought about how natural this felt, sitting with someone who understood the weight of responsibility and the cost of duty. "Jake," Queen Lyrelei said eventually. "Yes?" "Tomorrow, will you teach me this dancing you spoke of?" Jake smiled. "I'd be honored." "And Jake?" "Yes, Your Majesty. When we are alone, you may call me Lyrelei." Back at the human quarters, Jake found his team waiting with worried expressions. Commander Cole was pacing like a caged animal. Dr. Park was staring at her scanners with disbelief. Ambassador Wright looked like she had a headache. "We have a problem," Wright said as soon as Jake walked in. "The Croton Empire has arrived," Cole said. 3 warships just came out of hyperspace. "They're demanding an audience with the Queen." Dr. Park looked up from her scanners. "And Jake, the Queen's biochemical readings are off the charts. Whatever happened in those gardens, it accelerated everything. She's showing signs of deep emotional attachment." "The Crotons are bad news," Cole continued. "Intelligence says they're one of the most aggressive species in the galaxy. If they're here, it's probably to cause trouble for our negotiations." Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that ends with humans being banned from this part of space forever," Wright said. "Or worse." Jake looked out the window toward the palace. Somewhere in there, Lyrelei was probably dealing with this new threat. He wondered if she was back to being the cold, perfect queen, or if she was still the woman who had shared stories in her garden. "What do we do?" he asked. "We prepare for the worst," Cole said, "and hope that your friendship with the Queen is strong enough to survive whatever the Crotons are planning." The Croton delegation marched into Queen Lyrelei's throne room like they owned it. They were huge, even by alien standards, with thick gray skin covered in bony plates and eyes like black holes. Their leader, Warlord Thaxon, stood nearly 8 feet tall and looked like he could crush a human with one hand. Jake stood with his team behind the Zephyrian nobles, watching as Queen Lyrelei received the Crotons with perfect royal composure. She sat on her throne like a statue carved from ice, showing no emotion as Warlord Thaxon spoke. "Queen Lyrelei." Thaxon's voice rumbled like rocks falling down a mountain. "The Croton Empire is concerned about reports of your association with these primitive humans. The Zephyrian Empire's diplomatic choices are not the concern of the Croton Empire," the Queen replied, her voice calm and cold. Thaxon laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Everything is our concern when it affects the balance of power in the sector. These humans are weak. They will make you weak." Jake felt Commander Cole tense beside him. Dr. Park was quietly taking readings with her scanner. Ambassador Wright watched everything with the careful attention of someone who knew they were seeing the future of human-alien relations being decided. "Prove your claim," Queen Lirelai said. Gladly. Thaxon stepped forward. I invoke the ancient laws of challenge. Let the humans prove their worth or be banished from Zephyrian space forever. The throne room went completely silent. Jake could feel hundreds of alien eyes turning toward him and his team. This was what they had feared. The Crotons were forcing a confrontation that humans couldn't win. Queen Lirelai's expression didn't change, but Jake saw her hands grip the arms of her throne slightly tighter. The law of challenge is sacred. What form will this test take? Combat, of course. Their strongest warrior against mine. When their champion falls, they will leave and never return. Jake stepped forward. He could feel his team trying to stop him, but he ignored them. I accept the challenge. Warlord Thaxon turned his massive head toward Jake and smiled, showing teeth like broken glass. Excellent. This will be entertaining. Wait, Jake said, holding up his hand. You said prove our worth. Combat only proves who's stronger. That's not what makes humans valuable. Thaxon's smile faded. What are you saying, little human? Jake looked up at Queen Lirelai. For just a moment their eyes met, and he saw something that might have been hope. I challenge the basis of your test, Jake said, his voice carrying across the huge room. You want to prove humans are weak? Then test what makes us strong. Test our ability to lead, to build, to inspire others. This is not how challenges work, Thaxon growled. Then maybe it's time for a new kind of challenge, Jake replied. Give us each a Zephyrian colony to govern for 1 month. Whoever creates the better results wins. The throne room erupted in whispers. This was completely unprecedented. Jake had just thrown out thousands of years of tradition and proposed something that had never been done before. Warlord Thaxon looked confused and angry. This is not combat. This is not how warriors prove themselves. No, Jake said. It's how leaders prove themselves. Queen Lirelai leaned forward slightly. The challenge has been modified. Do you accept these terms, Warlord Thaxon? Thaxon looked around the room, realizing he had been outmaneuvered. He couldn't refuse without looking weak in front of everyone. Fine. But when I prove that fear and strength are superior to your human weakness, you will leave this sector forever. Agreed, Jake said. And when I prove that cooperation and respect work better than fear, the Croton Empire will acknowledge humanity as equals. Queen Lirelai stood up. The challenge is accepted. The colony world of Altara 7 will be divided. Each challenger will govern half the population for 30 days. I will personally observe both approaches. 3 days later, Jake found himself on a shuttle heading to Altara 7. The colony was a mining world, home to several thousand Zephyrians who extracted rare crystals from deep underground. It was hard, dangerous work, and the people there had a reputation for being tough and independent. Dr. Park came with him, along with a small team of human advisors. Commander Cole wanted to come too, but Jake needed him to stay with Ambassador Wright to protect the main diplomatic mission. Altara 7 looked like a frontier world from the old American West. If the American West had been populated by blue-skinned aliens and powered by crystal technology. The main settlement was built around the mine entrances, with simple buildings that looked functional rather than beautiful. The colony administrator, a middle-aged Zephyrian named Kalax, met them at the landing pad. He looked tired and worried. Captain Martinez, Kalax said, I am not sure what you hope to accomplish here. These people respect strength. Warlord Thaxon arrived yesterday and has already implemented his governance style. Which is what? Fear, increased work quotas, punishment for any who fail to meet expectations. Production has increased 20% in 2 days. Jake nodded. And how do the workers feel about this? Kalax looked surprised by the question. How they feel is not relevant. They obey because they must. Show me the workers. Kalax led them to the main mine entrance. Hundreds of Zephyrian miners were coming off their shifts, looking exhausted and beaten down. Their clothes were covered in crystal dust. Their faces were grim, and they moved like people who had given up hope. Jake watched them for a while, then turned to Kalax. I want to meet with the shift supervisors, all of them tonight, to give them orders, to ask them what they need. That evening, Jake sat in the colony's meeting hall with 20 Zephyrian supervisors. These were the people who knew the mines better than anyone, who understood the workers and the challenges they faced every day. I'm not here to tell you how to do your jobs, Jake said. You've been mining these crystals for years. You know what works and what doesn't. I want to know what would make your work easier, safer, and more efficient. The supervisors looked at each other uncertainly. No one had ever asked them these questions before. Finally, an older female named Zara spoke up. The equipment in Tunnel 7 needs repair, but requisitions take months to approve. What else? Jake asked. The work shifts are too long, said another supervisor. People make mistakes when they're tired. Mistakes in the mines can kill. The safety protocols haven't been updated in 50 years, added a third. We've learned better ways to extract crystals, but regulations prevent us from implementing them. Jake took notes as they talked. For 3 hours, the supervisors told him about problems that had been ignored for decades. Equipment failures, safety hazards, inefficient procedures, low morale. Okay, Jake said finally. Here's what we're going to do. Zara, you're in charge of equipment requisitions. I'm giving you authority to approve repairs immediately. Corvex, I want you to redesign the shift schedules to reduce fatigue. Mylian, you have full authority to update safety protocols. The supervisors stared at him. You are giving us authority? Zara asked. You're the experts. You know what needs to be done better than I do. My job is to remove the obstacles and let you do your work. Over the next week, Jake watched the changes take effect. Equipment got repaired. Work schedules became more reasonable. Safety improved, but more importantly, the workers started to look different. They stood straighter, moved with more energy, and actually began to smile. Jake walked through the mines every day, talking to workers, listening to their concerns, and finding ways to help. He didn't give orders. He asked questions and provided resources. Meanwhile, on the other side of the colony, Warlord Thaxon ruled through fear and intimidation. Production numbers were higher, but Jake could see the cost. Workers moved like frightened animals. Accidents increased. Several people had been injured trying to meet impossible quotas. Queen Lyrelei arrived for her inspection at the end of the second week. Jake met her at the landing pad along with Kalax and several of the supervisors. Your Majesty, Jake said. Welcome to Altara 7. She was back in full royal mode, surrounded by guards and advisors. But when their eyes met, Jake saw a flicker of the woman who had shared coffee and stories in her private garden. Captain Martinez, I am here to observe the results of your governance experiment. What do you have to show me? Better to show than tell, Jake said. Would you like a tour? They walked through both halves of the colony. In Thaxon's section, workers barely looked up as the Queen passed. They kept their heads down and focused on their tasks with grim determination. Production boards showed impressive numbers. In Jake's section, something different happened. Workers stopped what they were doing and approached the Queen. They wanted to show her improvements they had made, safety innovations they had developed, new techniques they had discovered. Your Majesty, said Zara, the supervisor Jake had put in charge of equipment. Look at this new crystal extraction method we developed. It's 30% more efficient and much safer. Queen Lyrelei examined the innovation with interest. This is impressive. Who designed it? We all did, working together. Captain Martinez gave us permission to experiment. Another worker, a young male named Jorik, stepped forward. Your Majesty, I used to be afraid to come to work. Now I look forward to it. We're not just following orders anymore. We're solving problems. Queen Lyrelei looked at Jake. You have given them autonomy. I've given them respect, Jake replied. They were always smart. The entire population of Altara 7 gathered in the main square at sunset. Workers from both halves of the colony stood together, but Jake could see the difference between them. His workers stood tall and looked alert. Thaxon's workers looked tired and nervous. Queen Lyrelei sat on a portable throne that had been brought from her ship. Her face showed no emotion, but Jake knew her well enough now to see the tension in the way she held her shoulders. Warlord Thaxon stood in the center of the square, like a mountain of gray flesh and bone. He had spent the month terrorizing his half of the colony into higher production, and he was clearly confident about what would happen next. People of Altara 7. Thaxon's voice boomed across the square. You have seen two approaches to leadership, fear and strength versus weakness and sentiment. The numbers prove that strength wins. My workers produced 23% more crystals than the humans' workers. There were murmurs from the crowd. Jake had to admit the numbers were accurate. Fear was a powerful motivator in the short term. However, Thaxon continued, governance is not the true test of worth. Combat is. I demand the right to settle this challenge in the traditional way. Single combat. To the death. Queen Lyrelei stood up slowly. Jake could see the conflict in her eyes. She didn't want to allow this, but the ancient laws of her people were clear. The challenge modification was temporary, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the square. Warlord Thaxon has the right to invoke traditional combat terms. Jake stepped forward. His heart was beating fast, but his voice was steady. I accept. Thaxon smiled his terrible smile. Excellent. Finally, we will see what happens when human weakness meets Croton strength. But before anyone could move, one of Jake's workers stepped forward. It was Jorik, the young miner who had spoken to the Queen during her inspection. Wait, Jorik said. I have something to say. Thaxon growled. Workers do not speak during challenges. This worker has something important to say, Jake said firmly. In my section of the colony, everyone has a voice. Queen Lyrelei gestured for Jorik to speak. The young Zephyrian looked nervous, but he stood straight and spoke clearly. Warlord Thaxon, you say your approach produced more crystals, but you didn't count what we lost. What do you mean? The Queen asked. Jorik looked around at his fellow workers, then continued. In Thaxon's section, there were 17 accidents this month. 3 workers were seriously injured. 2 are still in the medical bay. In Captain Martinez's section, there were 2 minor accidents and both workers returned to duty the same day. Another worker stepped forward, an older woman from Thaxon's section, and 5 people quit. They left the colony because they couldn't stand the conditions anymore. Plus the equipment breakdowns, added Zara. Thaxon pushed the machines past their limits. Half of them need major repairs now. Jake watched as more workers stepped forward from both sections. They were doing something that had probably never happened before in Zephyrian history. Regular people were challenging the decisions of their leaders. Jorik turned to face the crowd. Warlord Thaxon got higher production by breaking people and machines. Captain Martinez got lower production but made everything stronger. Which approach do you think will work better over years instead of just 1 month? The crowd began to murmur agreement. Even some of Thaxon's workers were nodding. Thaxon's face turned darker. Enough of this. Workers' opinions do not matter. Only strength matters. Only victory matters. Then why are you so afraid to let them speak? Jake asked. I am not afraid of anything, human. Then prove it. Let's expand the challenge. Instead of single combat, let's make it about real leadership. Give the workers a choice. Let them decide which approach they want to follow. Queen Lyrelei looked intrigued. Explain. Jake turned to address the entire crowd. Every worker here chooses a leader. Not because they're forced to, but because they want to. Whoever the majority chooses wins the challenge. Thaxon snarled. This is not how challenges work. This is how democracy works, Jake replied. It's how humans choose their leaders. The people decide. Your Majesty, Thaxon appealed to Queen Lyrelei. This is not traditional. The ancient laws say nothing about workers choosing leaders. Queen Lyrelei was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see her thinking, weighing tradition against something new. The ancient laws also say nothing about governance challenges, she said finally. We have already broken with tradition. Let us see where this path leads. The workers will choose. Jake felt a surge of hope, but also terror. Everything depended on what happened next. Jorik stepped forward again. I choose Captain Martinez. Zara joined him. I choose Captain Martinez. One by one, the workers from Jake's section declared their choice. Then, slowly, workers from Thaxon's section began to cross the square. I'm tired of being afraid, said one woman. I want to work for someone who listens, said an older man. Captain Martinez treats us like people, not machines, said another. The trickle became a flood. By the time it was over, nearly 80% of the workers had chosen Jake. Even some of Thaxon's guards looked like they wanted to join them. Warlord Thaxon stood alone in the center of the square, his face twisted with rage. This means nothing. These are workers, servants. Their opinions have no value. Their opinions are the only thing that has value, Jake said. A leader without followers is just someone talking to himself. Thaxon roared and charged at Jake. But before he could reach him, something unexpected happened. The workers moved. Hundreds of them stepped between Thaxon and Jake, forming a protective wall. "If you want to hurt Captain Martinez," Jorik said, "you'll have to go through all of us." Queen Lyrelay stood up. "Enough." Her voice carried absolute authority. "The challenge is over. The workers have chosen. Captain Martinez wins." Thaxon stopped, breathing hard. "This is not finished, human. The Croton Empire will remember this insult." "The Croton Empire will respect the results of a fair challenge," Queen Lyrelay said coldly, "unless they wish to break their own laws of honor." Thaxon glared at everyone present, then stalked away toward his ship. His guards followed, leaving the square to the cheering workers and the victorious humans. But Jake barely heard the cheering. He was looking at Queen Lyrelay, who was walking down from her throne toward him. "Congratulations, Captain Martinez," she said formally. "You have proven that humanity deserves a place among the spacefaring races." "Thank you, Your Majesty." They stood there for a moment, formal and proper, while hundreds of beings watched. But Jake could see something in her eyes, something that reminded him of coffee and gardens and quiet conversations about dancing. The crowd began to disperse, heading back to their homes and jobs. Dr. Park appeared at Jake's elbow, scanning everything with her equipment. Ambassador Wright and Commander Cole arrived on a shuttle from the main planet, wearing expressions of relief and pride. "Well done, Captain," Wright said. "This victory secures the alliance between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire." "More than that," Dr. Park added quietly. "It proves that human values can work even with alien cultures." They spent the next hour in meetings and reports. The formal alliance was signed. Trade agreements were finalized. Humanity officially became a junior partner in the Zephyrian Empire, with access to their technology and protection. But through it all, Jake kept thinking about Queen Lyrelay. She had returned to her ship after the ceremony, and he hadn't had a chance to speak with her privately. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, Jake made a decision. "I need to see the Queen one more time," he told Ambassador Wright. "The mission is complete, Captain. There's no need for further meetings." "This isn't about the mission." Wright looked at him carefully. "Jake, be very careful. Don't do anything that could jeopardize what we've achieved." Jake nodded and walked to the Queen's ship. The guards let him pass without question. He found Queen Lyrelay in her private cabin, looking out at the stars through a crystal window. "Jake," she said without turning around, "I wondered if you would come. I couldn't leave without saying goodbye." She turned to face him. She was still wearing her formal robes, but her expression was the one he remembered from their quiet conversations. "Your people will be expecting you to return home as a hero," she said. "Probably. And you will go?" Jake looked at her. "That depends." "On what?" Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything, one way or another. "On whether you want me to stay." Queen Lyrelay was very still. "Jake, I know this is crazy. I know we're from different worlds, literally. I know there are a million reasons why this won't work." He stepped closer to her. "But I also know that I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Jake felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if he would fly or fall. "You love me," she repeated like she was trying to understand a foreign language. "Yes. I love the way you ask questions about everything, like you're discovering the universe for the first time. I love how you curled up in your chair when I told you about dancing. I love that you have gardens where you go to remember who you are." Queen Lyrelay walked to him slowly. "Love is not something queens are supposed to feel. Maybe it's time to change what queens are supposed to do." She reached up and touched his face gently. "You would give up Earth, your career, your people?" "I wouldn't be giving them up, I'd be building."